Hi, I'm Aaron Hedges, Inheritance of Hope CEO, and I'm very honored today to be here with Derek Milligan, Inheritance of Hope's co-founder, our former longtime CEO, and looking forward this afternoon to having a conversation with him about his memories and Inheritance of Hope's history. And so welcome, Derek. Thanks very much for making time today. And let's just go with the first prompt here.
All right.
So, take me back to the beginning, the early days. What are some of your earliest memories of Inheritance of Hope?
Yeah, well, it starts in 2003, really, with Kristen's diagnosis of a terminal cancer. At the time, our children, they were 4, 2, and 7 months old. And even though at that point we weren't thinking of Inheritance of Hope, that set us off on the journey that ultimately led to starting Inheritance of Hope in 2007. Prior to actually founding Inheritance of Hope, one of our friends, Kristen, had written some books. One of our friends was a printer in New York City, and he said, "Hey, if you're going to start a nonprofit, I could donate the printing of these books." To which I said, "Heck no. No way are we going to start a nonprofit." However, maybe a year or two later, I went back to school, and ultimately, that's what we did. We ended up starting Inheritance of Hope. And he did, in fact, donate the printing of those books, and later came onto our board as well. So, that's really how it kind of started. Also, along the way, I was a professional trumpet player, went back to school, got an MBA, and really in order to be equipped to do Inheritance of Hope. Through that process, we wrote the business plan for Inheritance of Hope, some of my classmates and I, and did well in NYU's business plan competition.
Yeah. So it's an amazing story to think about what you left to start IOH, and maybe kind of just walk us through what it was like to have a wife who was sick, 3 kids, and to leave your job for this totally unknown venture.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of uncertainty there.
Yes.
Certainly with her illness, a lot of uncertainty about how that would go, or whether the treatments would work, or even which treatment to pursue or not.
Yeah.
So lots of question marks around that. Lots of question marks around Inheritance of Hope. Was this going to be successful? We didn't have any financing. Oh, by the way, we started this right before one of the biggest crashes of the U.S. markets.
The Great Recession, right?
Yeah. So. A lot of uncertainty there, and that you juxtapose that with the fact that I was in the military. I had about as much total security as you could possibly have in any job, and the trajectory of my promotion was pretty clear. So, and also Kristen's insurance was fully secured at that point. We had gone through a period where that was uncertain as well, but had gotten through that, and so her treatments were covered, and we were kind of leaving all of this behind. And so that was a daunting decision, I think more so for me than Kristen, honestly. We actually, the day before I was going to tell my boss that I wasn't re-enlisting, which was also on a personal level difficult because she had really groomed me and mentored me, so felt a little bit like I was letting her down as well. The day before I was going to tell her, we went to church. A pastor who had never spoken before, never seen him before or since, just a guest that day. He spoke about choosing opportunity over uncertainty, and I felt like that was the nudge to, okay, this is really God's leading. Let's go for it.
Wow, it is an amazing story. And your kids, you said they were 4 years old, 2 years old, and less than a year,
right,
when all that decision was being made.
Well, I guess by that time, you fast forward a few years from the diagnosis, so they were probably, maybe 3 years past that.
Okay. Did they have any sense at that time, you think, of kind of the significance of the things you were considering?
Oh, in terms of starting Inheritance of Hope, no, I don't think so. And even to some extent, the illness, we really were intentional from the beginning about including them at an age-appropriate level, but they were so little. What's age-appropriate at that age is not a great deal of information. Although we did later learn that there would be anxieties even in their minds about, for example, we go off to a surgery. We later found out that they were worried, would I come home?
Oh, wow.
Not only would Kristen how would she fare? But perhaps neither of us might return. And so that was eye-opening.
Wow. Now, I know that at some point you began having each of your children go with Kristen when she had treatments or things in the city. Maybe just tell some stories of those trips for Kristen and the kids.
Yeah, I think that was all part of the being intentional. I vividly remember sitting in the office in New York City at Sloan Kettering and discussing this treatment, which was going to essentially involve a full day every week.
Okay.
And Kristen was despairing over this loss of time. You feel this urgency of, I don't have much time as it is, and now, one full day every week is just gone. And somewhere along the way I said, what if you bring a child, one of our children with you each time you come down here, and then, now it's not a waste anymore. Okay. And that really proved to be a great benefit to Kristen in feeling like something productive was happening, but also in our children. They really looked forward to that time with her. Sure. And it removed anxiety because they knew what was going on, even when it wasn't their turn to go, and they were back at home with me. Okay. The other two had a real sense of, this is what's happening right now, this is what it looks like. And I think, we probably all of us, and maybe children especially, tend to fear kind of, things that we don't know. It's very easy to imagine the worst, and oftentimes, worse than the reality. So it removed that anxiety from them. And they had great times. The way that Kristen's particular treatment plan was structured, she had a window of time in between treatments. So she would go on the way down to the city, they would ride the train. This is a big adventure. Right. Get a donut, which is, this is a huge treat. Maybe even get to play on some electronics along the way. So lots of things that were very special and unique for them. And then they would do something big in the city in that break. Maybe they would go to Central Park Zoo. Sometimes they might even go to a Broadway show. Wow, okay. So they still, to this day, have very fond memories of that time. In fact, our son, when that treatment came to an end about a year later, said, effectively, I don't want you to feel sick anymore, but I want to keep going to the city.
Yeah, that's such a perfect example, I think, of being intentional, which is certainly one of the core aspects of Inheritance of Hope. But doing it with your family first is such a wonderful example. You mentioned the tendency that people have in the unknown to wonder or to imagine things. Everybody, but maybe kids especially. And I've heard you tell a story about Luke and a certain treatment and kind of his, now it would seem humorous, but just tell us that story.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking of. So at one point later, Kristen was getting radiation, and we thought we would do the same thing and include them in this process. And so one time Luke went down with her for her radiation treatment. Right. And the nurses were very gracious and, had Luke speak to her through the intercom system. Okay. Oh. And we learned, though, later he was disappointed because in his mind he was anticipating laser guns that were going to be shooting at his mom, and perhaps he might even have the opportunity to wield one of these weapons, which would have been a lot of fun for him. And so, how do you even address such things? It wouldn't have occurred to us that that's what was in his mind.
Yeah, radiation, right? That's such a fun story. Well, there are so many things from those early days, and certainly IOH has come a long way since then, but if you would just kind of walk through some pivotal moments, key moments where you made a decision or something happened and it really shaped IOH in a significant and lasting way.
Well, I mentioned before going back to school. I think getting an MBA was pivotal in preparing me, making the decision to hire you in the very early times. Huge. And bearing fruit all these years later.
Thanks, Derek.
And not just you, but you were the first hire, but all of our subsequent hires, the amazing staff that we've put together, leadership, everybody, volunteers. So all the people who've come alongside, and goes back to even my friend who printed the books and made that suggestion, friends who helped write the business plan. So just people who've come alongside To what degree did I play a role in that? Maybe that's debatable. In some cases, perhaps more than others, but definitely God bringing people alongside to do things that neither Kristen nor I were capable of doing by ourselves.
Sure.
So that I would say the people probably primary in terms of pivotal, and that extends now out to the board, exceptional board that we've put together over the years to lead and guide Inheritance of Hope, to help with fundraising, partners who've come alongside as well, to financially make it possible to do what we've done to keep us afloat, when times were particularly challenging.
Sure.
So, I think those would be the key things.
Sure. Yeah, and I love how you emphasize the people. As much as we want to serve families well, that really is a ripple effect, right, of having great people on our team and caring about each other, and then that extends out very naturally to all the IOH families. In my own memory, thinking back to a pivotal moment, but I'll let you tell the story. You had the first family retreat, and before we called them legacy retreats, you had family retreat, and it went very well, and began making plans for the second one. But I guess there were some growing pains or learning curves, and certainly some significant decision making that happened in the course of that second retreat. And maybe you could share some of that story with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the heels of the first retreat, my family and I were on our way to Australia to live for 4 months while I studied abroad as part of that program. And I think going into the retreat, we just thought nobody will notice that we're gone and it won't matter. But it became clear to me that we were going to need some backup, and that's where you came in. Right. Moved into our house, and you and I Skyped at the time from Sydney weekly to kind of keep the wheels turning.
That's right.
With Inheritance of Hope. So that of course was important. The second retreat, interestingly, and this brings back a memory too that you'll also share. But in the early days of Inheritance of Hope, and this is hard to imagine now, going to the mailbox was an event.
That's right.
Right? I mean, because Inheritance of Hope was kind of, it was only at one point it was only a figment of my imagination.
Sure.
And then something only on paper, maybe a business plan. Right. And so going to the post office was a validation. Are we real? Do we exist? Are we legitimate? And so getting a piece of mail in the box was the legitimizing force that said, somebody out there knows that we exist. Right. And we are, in fact, real.
Any kind of mail.
In the early days, really, a single piece of mail, even if it was junk mail, early on was a kind of a source of encouragement that tells you where we started and the humble
somebody else out there knows IOH exists.
Yeah, I don't even care who they are or why they know that we exist or what their objective is. Yeah. So contrast that with now is there's not a day that we don't get tons of mail, right? Of all kinds. So
at the time that was a real question. If I went, you would ask, was there any mail?
Oh yeah.
And if you went, I would ask you.
Yeah, and it was it really was. Those are the kinds of things you're looking for encouragement in the early days of a startup enterprise. Is this thing going to go? Are people going to want to come? Yeah. Can we encourage people to participate? Can we encourage donors to give? All of these questions. Yeah. And in the midst of this, so our second event, we ended up with one family. Right. And here we are, kind of thinking, wow, what. This is not a good trajectory. We're going down in terms of interest. So we pressed on and pushed through that and come a long way since then.
Yeah. When there was only that one family, were there any thoughts of, this trajectory is not looking good? Have we maybe run our course? Or, were there other conversations there? Yeah,
I think it would surprise many, but there was a time when Kristen, somewhere in this time frame, Kristen said, maybe we're done. We've served our children, and we've served these handful of families well. Right. Maybe we've got a lot going on. Maybe we should be done here. Right. And I wasn't having any of that. So.
You did have a lot going on, but you had a vision for for continuing to build, for
Right.
sure.
It was never a consideration to stop. And in fact, to this day, people ask me, could I ever imagine IOH growing to this point? And always the answer has been absolutely. And in fact, far more.
Yes, right. Right. Even when it was just that one family, you were seeing so much more ahead. Yeah, that's really cool.
Definitely.
So you talked about growth, and certainly Inheritance of Hope has grown a lot. We've served many hundreds of families to date. There's been a lot of change with that. Change is one of those things that maybe is not easy. People react to it in different ways, but could you just sort of give some stories or examples of what it's been like to lead through a lot of change over time for Inheritance of Hope?
Yeah. Well, I think all of us tend to be resistant to change.
Sure.
We're comfortable with whatever's happening, perhaps even if that thing that's happening is maybe not even the most desirable. So there've been a number of times where I've made a decision to go a different direction, possibly to eliminate something that we were doing. Fundraising events. Team IOH in the very early days was a vital part of Inheritance of Hope fundraising.
Sure.
And critical to our existence in the early time.
And Team IOH meaning like runners fundraising to do the Marine Corps Marathon, the New York City Marathon.
Right.
Yeah.
And any kind of race or endurance event, and raising support. Yeah, that was one of our biggest initiatives. It was our biggest initiative in the first number of years. And over time, that landscape has evolved, and we've kind of scaled back. We had our own event for a while that was very popular, and that kind of became too much of a focus of what we were doing, to the point that I made the decision to stop doing that event, and that was not a popular decision. Took about a year probably for people to say, yeah, we're glad that's what decision was made, but that was not the initial reaction.
But it took about a year really before people sort of recognized that in fact that was a good change, even though it was a hard one.
Yeah, that was not the initial reaction when I made the decision. Sure. And similarly, our early retreats had a max of 8 families. Right. And that was because we would have a breakout group. That's what we felt like was the largest breakout group that would be feasible, manageable, and intimate to have authentic relationships. And when I made the decision to go to 16, same thing, right? Well, this is not going to be any good. It's not going to be personal anymore.
Right.
And my feeling always was this is going to be better because you're going to still have the same intimacy of the group of 8, but perhaps you're going to meet somebody at lunch or during an activity who would not have been there if the event was only 8 families. So it's actually additive. And I also embraced an attitude like, let's go for this, and if I'm wrong, then we'll scale back again in terms of the size of that event. But that worked effectively like I thought it would. We went to 24, 32. I still envision, my mindset on that is we will grow it until the point that it's proves us wrong, and so we say, okay, now we know. Right. That was too much, and then we know what that threshold is on that. So many things involving change that is a challenge. Organizational structure that we've changed as we've grown. Sure. It wasn't so long ago that our whole staff was a handful of people. That's right. And so as we've grown now to a staff of 17, and that requires a different organizational structure, right? Different systems in place that weren't necessary before, just because of the scope. Sure. And that involves changing roles, and changing flow of communication, and in our case, an entirely different organizational structure. And all, I think, ultimately for the best, but that change is not easy. Sure. Yeah, and certainly we've had legacy retreats more recently with over 30 families, and it's fun, it's tremendous, and there's all those connections, like you said, where there are opportunities for all different people to find a friend and somebody who gets it, right? They get what it's like. But getting there from an 8-family retreat was not automatic. It was a very intentional
even resisted thing. That's what I'm hearing from you. And would it be fair to say that you're hoping we'll continue to expand in those ways for the positive value that it could provide?
Sure. We need to grow, really to continue to exist in many ways. We've got to evolve. If we just remain static, I believe the organization would die, ultimately. So we've got to continue to evolve to the needs of our families, to the landscape. We've seen that recently where online has become more of a focal point, so we've really invested in that and try to make that flourish. And I think we've done well, and we're not finished in that area. And it gets back to the people, right? We have a group of people who strive for excellence in everything.
Yes. Right.
And so in that sense, I think I've surrounded myself with people like me who, in the best sense, are not satisfied, want to keep striving for the best and keep pushing. It's good now, maybe it's great, but what can we do to make it even better? And we have a heart to serve people. And, we know that the population out there is huge who need what we have to offer. And we want to be able to touch their lives. And in order to do that, we need to grow. If 1 in 20 children lose a parent, that's a lot of families. And we want to serve them.
Right. Yeah, 1 in 20 children facing loss of a parent by age 16 is a staggering statistic, but it's something to really take to heart as I become CEO and keep leading the team. It's not that anything is bad or wrong with what has happened, right? But that, like you said, to not leave it alone, as good as it is, to keep pressing and improving it is a challenge, but I think a great one for our future. You've mentioned a couple times people, including the staff, and maybe this kind of falls under that pivotal moments thing, but just talk a little bit about kind of the staffing strategy and not having an office, yet having this staff that does work so well together.
Yeah, this one I think, for better or worse, I feel prescient because pre-COVID, IOH has always been remote. We've never had a home office that wasn't my house or wherever the people who are working for us live. And my attitude has always been, I want the right people, and I don't care where they are. And if I have the right people, it doesn't matter where they are. They're gonna produce. They're gonna be productive. And so I've really embraced from the beginning. And I think that part of this boils down to how do I want to be treated? Sure. I want to be treated with respect, like I'm going to take care of what I'm supposed to do, and not be micromanaged. Sure. And so, I've brought in the kind of people I think that appreciate that and thrive in that environment. And to the extent that it's possible, it doesn't matter to me when the work gets done, right? Or really how. In many ways, if it can be flexible, right. I want to be flexible. This also, by the way, fits in with really the mission of Inheritance of Hope. If we're about families, then I want to be flexible about, if you need to attend this game or you want to go to this event at school, or whatever it is. I want to foster a work environment that acknowledges that. Right.
Right. Yeah. Take care of our families in the way we want to take care of others. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that really sets Inheritance of Hope apart. As you said, this is pre-COVID. I mean, going back to 2008, 2009, that's always been the mode. Flexibility, work from home, and just take care of things. That's really, really unique. So another thing that has changed over time, but is kind of fun to think about, legacy videos have always been one of Inheritance of Hope's main offerings. But I know that was also not automatic. There was a pivotal decision there. So maybe tell me how those came about, and then we could talk about just how the process of doing them has changed pretty dramatically over the years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, this, I think providential ultimately, but I'd say, well, maybe not even, really no question. The biggest disagreement that Kristen and I ever had was related to the legacy videos. And so at our first event, I'm in business school. I'm thinking we've got to be able to show people
right.
what we're doing,
show impact,
and have some marketing of our event
yep.
to grow. Kristen, on the other hand, was thinking about the families exclusively and saying, we are not going to exploit these families who we are
right.
serving.
Right.
And so I think, both positions were legitimate, but we really were kind of stuck in this with her saying, we're not going to have cameras there, and me saying, we have to have cameras there. And by the way, this was a huge expense at the time to do that relative to the overall organization.
Yeah, because this was at the very, very beginning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we started with zero capital. Right. And so the solution, or I didn't know it was going to be a solution, but my suggestion was, how about this? What if we make the cameras available to families and they can use it for their benefit, and now they have a professional video for them. And, in exchange, you will allow some marketing to happen as well.
Right.
And so she probably reluctantly agreed to do that on that condition. And so that's really the genesis of the legacy video.
Okay.
And, to get to your kind of the second point of your question, in the early days, that first retreat particularly, it was really almost apologetic. Like, hey, there's going to be a video camera set up.
Okay.
And if you want to use it, you can use it. It's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were not really structured or pushing this. By the way, this is in a hotel room where this is set up in the videographer's hotel room. And, like pushing beds out of the way, pushing beds up against the wall, up onto the wall vertically. Lighting, trying to be as professional with lighting as possible. That one was professional because we had the professional there. But in subsequent events, we were doing this now on our own because we couldn't really afford to hire professionals for every event. So, it largely involved me and you manhandling furniture in hotel rooms that wasn't maybe bolted down, and setting up lights as best we could, and then videoing it ourselves, right. For the most part. So we've come a long way from that. And also since then we've learned to structure that time to communicate much more in advance about helping people so that they can prepare, right. And be ready for it. And we've also learned what are the pain points, what are the things that make people resistant to doing a video, and we can address that now directly in advance. Right.
Yeah, it is amazing to think back to literally rearranging an entire hotel room. All of it, trying to block out the light, set up some light. And now we can actually offer legacy videos on demand. We have a whole team of legacy video coaches. Somebody can sign up on our website and potentially even the next day create a legacy video with a coach who is expert at walking them through the pain points, as you referenced, and no furniture movement needed. Right. It can all be done digitally. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing even to think that that offering almost didn't even come about at all, and now it can be done on demand like that.
Yeah.
Incredible story in our history.
Yeah, it certainly has become one, I'd say the most important deliverable that we offer. And I would also say that the percentage of families who do a video, even though it's a really hard thing to do, is extremely, extremely high.
Right. And to my knowledge, nobody who has made one has ever felt anything less than thrilled that they had in fact made that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think I became emboldened in this after their first retreat. A man who I didn't spend much time with, but I still think of as a dear friend. His health declined pretty quickly after that event, and he was local. So I went to visit him, and he said, essentially on his deathbed, I was at the door. I was going to make a video. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Why didn't I do that? And just like the deepest regret that you can imagine. And that has stuck with me and encouraged me over the years to say, people, you really need to do this. I know it's hard, but you will never regret that you did it.
Yeah. And Inheritance of Hope, of course, focuses on young families facing the loss of a parent due to terminal illness. That's our mission. But the legacy video doesn't have to only be for families in that situation, right? I mean, anybody could. What would you say to people who, don't have a diagnosis, think they're healthy? Even there, would you encourage the making of a legacy video?
Oh, sure. And even beyond a legacy video, none of us knows what tomorrow will bring. Right. A diagnosis provides an opportunity to really kind of hold up the mirror and say, this is not, this will come to an end. But that's the case for all of us. Yeah. And so, I think the longer I've done this, the more I see the importance of being intentional and living life kind of in this mindset of, we don't know how long we have, so let's really embrace the time we have. And I would even kind of take that further to say, embrace it in an eternal perspective. And when I think when you do that, whether it's 90 years or 50 years, it becomes a whole lot less really important. But the importance of the day and how you're going to choose to spend your time, and are you going to look back on that and those activities or those, whatever it is that you focused on, and say, that was worthy. And certainly the legacy video is one of those things that people can look back on and say, that was worth the time and energy I spent doing it.
Right. It's a difficult thing. I mean, even for the families that do have a diagnosis, it can be a difficult thing to come to terms with, to want to talk about. I'd say just in our culture in general, we're not exactly eager to talk about death, to think about death. But I know you like a line from the Shawshank Redemption that maybe helps to change that perspective a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I believe the line is, get busy living or get busy dying. Right. Now, I would take exception to that because I don't think it's an either or. Right. I say it's a both and. Right. And, I've always thought of that. I love that movie, but that line in particular, which is repeated a few times, I think that's just, that's it. Except it's both. Get busy living and get busy dying. Yeah. And that's in a nutshell what my previous response was about being intentional. Right. If you are about getting busy living in such a way with a mindset that I am going to die, I think that's it.
Yeah. It's a very powerful change of perspective, but one that we'll all have to face at some point. So be intentional now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about this. Like how many of us, if you said, I guarantee you this particular event is going to happen, would you want to prepare for that? Like, who's going to say no? Whatever that is. You'd be like, yeah, let's get prepared, whatever that might be. Right. Well, here's one that we all know, but most of us, all of us probably at some level, don't really want to prepare.
That's right.
And I would encourage all of us to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard but good reminder, for sure. You've mentioned a time or two this afternoon the IOH board, and certainly I am privileged to know them and benefit very much from that excellent group. But maybe you could just kind of tell us some of the work of building a board from, again, nothing, and now the kinds of people, the caliber of people that we have, and what an asset that really is to an organization like IOH.
Yeah. Well, I think in the early days, so much came down to establishing credibility. As an organization, is this something a family is going to want to come on? Is this something a donor is going to want to give to? Is this something that somebody want to work for?
Right.
Is this something somebody might want to serve on a board for? And, I'm grateful to our longtime president of our board, O.P. Cooper, who signed on when those things were not fully known. And, to this day, has continued to lead the board. Right. And, taken personal risks and really done a lot of work and just believed before it existed.
Sure.
And so, it started there, and then, of course, has grown with others agreeing to sign on and take that fiduciary responsibility, which is no small thing.
Right.
To take responsibility for financial security, fundraising, personal giving at a meaningful level,
Right.
in every case. And these now, the people on our board, I like to tell people, if you were to hold up, sometimes you see this with sport teams maybe, but if you were to blank out which organization was which and hold up our board next to just about any other board of any for-profit organization,
Sure.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to know which was which, because of the depth of experience and just the quality of character of the people that we have on our board.
Yeah.
Just major executives of Fortune 500
Absolutely.
companies
Right.
represented on our board.
Right.
Increasingly families who we have served, who also have tremendous experience and wisdom
Right.
to bring to bear for other families, which is really meaningful, as well as just the personal insights that they have about living through this.
Right.
So very grateful for our board, and it's, I mentioned it as one of the pivotal things because it,
Right.
to this day, is vital. It's not something that everybody sees.
Right.
I have been, able to have the privilege to work with them closely for a long time, but many people don't get to see the work that goes on kind of behind the scenes. But
Sure.
it's critical what they do.
Right. And you mentioned among the board, several of them are family members who IOH has served. I think 4, in fact, of our board members,
Yeah.
Know firsthand what it is to be a family facing the loss of a parent. And that's true not only of our board, but as you know, when we started thinking about wildly important goals for Inheritance of Hope a few years back, one of our 2 very most important goals, wildly important goals, was that we wanted families who we had served to come back and serve with us. It's a quality measure to show that they were impacted, but it also fuels quality for future serving. What does that mean to you and to IOH that so many people we have served do in fact come back and pay it forward in that way?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to the IOH family. It's all about growing the IOH family, and it's very meaningful. Any way that happens is really meaningful to me, whether we're growing volunteers, but to see someone who we have impacted, and we've impacted them such that they want to invest their time, their resources into providing this experience for others. Right. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, it's a great affirmation. And we've had, I don't know the exact number, but hundreds of instances of that just in our current year. It's something that we track. But yeah, hundreds of times now in a year, people we have served do serve with us. It's an incredible pipeline.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the wigs you mentioned, of course, I'll just say for those who don't know, it came from one of our board members with major executive experience in a Fortune 500 company who was a family that we served.
Who was, right, absolutely. So that really ties a lot of it together.
So we wouldn't have wigs without that IOH family and without
there you go.
Our board.
Yeah, that's a great way to connect so many dots. We've talked about a lot of things that are, serious and significant to IOH, and there's also a lot of funny things, just fun, unexpected things. What are some of your just fun memories? Things that maybe even people newer to IOH might not even be able to imagine that such a thing happened once upon a time.
Well, let's see. There's a lot. Well, one just that comes to mind because it was kind of just crazy. We were going to catch a Circle Line cruise, and really pushing it. And in the early days, of course, we still were very mindful about trying to stretch the donated dollar. But
and this would be in New York City.
This was, and this was among our earliest New York City events.
Yeah.
And so, myself and actually a few other board members were driving the rental vans. We had dropped families off, and now we've got to go park these vans in New York City, which it's not too many places you can park a 15-passenger van in Manhattan. And meanwhile, this boat's going to leave. So the board member and gentleman who donated the printing of these books, worked in New York City.
Okay.
So he's leading the way, and the light has changed, but we don't have time to wait for this light. So he's in front. He pulls out and blocks the oncoming traffic at a 90-degree angle.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's like some kind of ballet with 15 passenger vans, while the rest of us peel around behind him as he's blocking this off. And then he comes in so that we could get parked and make it back to catch the boat. These kinds of things that are happening behind the scenes, I think those are probably the funniest things, are usually the things that families don't see, or kind of the really late nights when you see a different side maybe of some silly personalities come out to some of the volunteers and staff.
Sure.
Or, just the lighthearted moments like that.
Right, yeah. So when our volunteers have served, a long Friday, long Saturday, then maybe Sunday night, we're kind of in the home stretch.
Yeah.
It's still a long night, but I know in the earliest days, maybe we didn't have all of our processes quite as figured out, didn't have as much equipment. Mm-hmm. I know you've told some stories at times about waiting for printers, and just tell us some of those late night stories.
Yeah, well, at the first retreat, again, it's bare bones. So we did have the idea that we were gonna print photos for an album that we were gonna present to families. Okay. So that much we knew. Mm-hmm. I think some of the mechanics of that we didn't really think through. By the way, I think on that first retreat, over the course of 4 days, I probably slept, 10, 12 hours or something total.
Composite over 4 days.
Yeah, it was. And that last night, we're going to print these photos with a single PhotoJet printer. And by this time, it's probably 2 in the morning. We got to have these things ready by 8 or whatever. And sitting there waiting at the printer, for every single picture to come out, and that was both kind of funny and sort of rough at the same time. And so then it evolved.
It's funny now to look back.
Yeah. Then it evolved to, we had 2 PhotoJet printers, and now we're really big time. Right. And we were doing this in the hotel room, and of course, this has evolved now. We're not doing that anymore, of course. But, constant evolution of changing and trying to improve the processes.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about IOH's growth and change, and there's been so much of that. I think maybe just to bring it full circle a little bit, and bring it back to your family. IOH has been around since 2007, so your kids have certainly grown up from then till now. And just going back to that personal story, how has that impact continued to shape your kids, your family?
Well, of course, they've benefited front row from Kristen's intentionality.
Sure.
And, continuing to benefit from that, kind of her participating in their lives, even though she's not here in many ways, through things that she's left, videos, that they can watch, and notes that they can read, things like that.
Yeah.
And beyond that, they have the IOH family to lean on, and it's really an extension. I see it as an extension of my family, and so do they. So, these are great friends, mentors, just a huge extended family, right, where they can find comfort, find examples, find memories of their mom as well. And I think, and of course, they love to be around their IOH family as much as they can. And so, it's been a real blessing to me and to my children. Inheritance of hope, whatever blessing that we've provided to others, I think has come back to us many times over. And I think it has a lot to do with how well my children are doing today.
Yeah. And that's wonderful to hear, and again, the example that we hope will be true for all the families that IOH serves, that long-term benefit that it really does bring through the hope-filled relationships. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Derek. certainly been a privilege over more than 14 years now to benefit from your leadership, your vision, dedication, and many behind-the-scenes ways of working with Inheritance of Hope that have brought us to this point, and I know that we do have very much still to look forward to in the future. But thank you for all those years ago, stepping out in the way that you shared so many uncertainties in a moment that so much was at stake for your family. But thank you for doing that and for that example of sensing God's leading. And now, of course, in hindsight, we can see how well that has played out. But thank you for, at the time, being willing to do that and lead in that meantime. Through Kristen's diagnosis, after she died, continuing to sustain IOH has changed many, many lives and will continue to do so in the future. So thank you for that. Thank you for all your leadership of Inheritance of Hope. And thank you for your time this afternoon to remember these stories and memories and share them for everybody to enjoy.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm happy to pass the CEO torch to you.